Your cooking is so plain. I can't eat this garbage. Helen, my mother-in-law, said as she forcefully threw the plate of food I had prepared against the kitchen wall. Helen had disliked me since I married her son, Adam, mainly because of my lower educational background, and she often made snide remarks. We had been keeping our distance for a while, but after being called back to the in-laws' house after a long time, this was the result. Helen had asked me to cook, likely as a way to assert dominance, but when I talked back, she got angry and threw the plate of food against the wall. Looking back, I realize I should have acted more maturely, but it was hard not to feel irritated when my hard work was insulted. The plate seemed to move in slow motion as it flew through the air, crashing loudly against the wall. The food splattered across the wall and floor. "Hey, what are you doing?" I hurried to intervene, but Helen, with a sneer on her face, began stomping on the food spread across the floor, almost as if to make a point. I was frozen in shock. No matter how much she disliked me, I never imagined she'd do something so cruel. Adam, hearing the commotion, came in and restrained Helen, scolding her for her behavior, but Helen showed no sign of remorse. "I'm not at fault. It was Carrie's cooking that was the problem. I was just trying to give her some guidance." Listening to her excuse, I was horrified to think she might actually believe what she was saying. Sure, I wasn't the perfect wife Helen had imagined for Adam, but that didn't justify throwing away someone else's cooking. Adam frowned in disgust, releasing his grip on Helen, and declared, "I don't want anything to do with you anymore, Mom. From now on, don't expect any more financial support. My name is Carrie, and I'm 29 years old. I met my husband, Adam, at work, and now we live together in an apartment. We don't have children, but our marriage is strong, and we often spend our weekends going out together. My in-laws live far away, and we haven't had many chances to visit them over the past few years." Helen dotes on Adam and frequently calls, urging him to come home. However, Adam seems reluctant and unenthusiastic about visiting her. I think the reason Adam avoids Helen is because of her difficult personality. Helen places great importance on social status, education, and career, and she cherishes Adam because he has a high income and an impressive education. On the other hand, she doesn't like me at all and makes it clear every time we meet. The reason is likely because I don't fit her image of a well-educated, high-earning wife. My parents died in an accident when I was in middle school, and I was raised by relatives until I graduated from high school. Wanting to become independent quickly, I didn't pursue further education and started living on my own, working part-time at a small restaurant. Adam, who was a regular customer, eventually became my husband, and I left my job to be with him, so I don't have any prestigious education or career to speak of. Helen must have known about my background from Adam beforehand because she wasn't friendly from the beginning. "Carrie didn't go to college, did she? I wanted Adam to marry a woman with a degree and a good income, but I'm disappointed. She's not suitable for our family. Could you call off this marriage?" I had expected some friction, but I was stunned to hear something so harsh right off the bat, and I was left speechless. It's true that the in-laws family is what you'd call an elite household. They live in a spacious house with a large garden, and Nicholas, my father-in-law, holds an executive position at his company while Adam works for a major corporation after graduating from a well-known university. Helen enjoys a luxurious lifestyle thanks to Nicholas's income, spending freely on shopping and hobbies without any constraints. From Helen's point of view, I must look like a woman with no value. Adam tried to reason with Helen, but she didn't see anything wrong with her words. asking, "What did I do wrong?" With a puzzled expression. I felt disheartened by Helen's attitude. But Adam was clearly upset by how she insulted me. He grabbed my hand, stood up quickly, and declared, "I married Carrie because I wanted to. Even if you oppose it, I'm staying with her." Helen was taken aback by Adam's words, and she looked flustered as he pulled me out of the in-laws' house without another word. After we returned home, Adam reflected on his actions, saying he had acted childishly, but I was touched. I appreciated that my usually calm husband stood up for me. Since then, we have had little to do with Helen. We occasionally keep in touch, like when there's a family gathering, but we keep our interactions minimal, and we rarely visit the in-laws' house. Personally, I have a strong aversion to Helen, so I feel it's enough to see her just for a few hours occasionally. That's why I was surprised when I received a message from Helen. "Tell Adam to come home next weekend. I'm sure you're just staying cooped up at home anyway, right? I want to see you both and catch up." Her voice over the phone still had that same commanding presence, as if she expected us to arrange our schedule around her. "I understand. I'll let Adam know," I replied before hanging up. During dinner, I told Adam that Helen had requested a visit, and his expression showed clear reluctance. "So the last time we saw Mom was at that relative's funeral, right? I don't want to go. Do I really have to?" "It's not mandatory, but maybe Helen just wants to see you after so long." But Mom always says harsh things to you. I don't want you to go through that. Thank you for thinking of me. I'm not a fan of Helen, but she's important to you. I'd feel bad if you avoided seeing your parents because of me." Understanding my concern, Adam reluctantly agreed to visit his parents during the upcoming holiday. When we arrived at the in-laws' house for the holiday, Helen greeted Adam warmly. "Adam, it's been so long. I've missed seeing you since the wedding." "Oh, Carrie, you're here too." Helen was speaking to Adam in a cheerful tone, but the moment she noticed me standing next to him, her demeanor shifted, turning cold. It was clear she had hoped to enjoy some family time, but seemed displeased that I had come along, viewing me as an intruder. The difference in her behavior towards Adam and me was another form of her passive-aggressive tactics. Even after we moved to the living room, Helen's snide remarks continued. "Carrie, these days, women are working, you know. Are you still a housewife? Young, wealthy couples send their kids to daycare and both work. That's what modern couples do. I can't stand wives who just live off their husband's income." Helen mentioned local dual-income families and looked down on me for being a housewife. I decided to endure her remarks, thinking I just needed to bear with it while we were here. Helen, seeing that I wasn't responding, seemed to think she could say whatever she wanted, and her remarks only grew bolder. Even though Helen herself is a housewife, she didn't seem to care that she's living off Nicholas's income. Helen tends to ignore things that don't fit her narrative, so she doesn't seem to feel any guilt about her own lifestyle. Eventually, she even brought up the topic of children. "My friends are always bragging about their grandchildren. I want grandkids too. When do you plan to give me one?" I'm sorry to disappoint, but Adam and I have decided to enjoy our time together for now. "So you're choosing not to have children. How long do you plan to stay in a honeymoon phase when you've been married for years? Maybe you should see a doctor." Helen's insensitive comment finally pushed Adam to step in. "Mom, enough. You don't get to interfere in something that personal." "Oh, so there really is something going on with you two, isn't there?" Helen, taking Adam's words as confirmation of an issue between us, seemed almost excited to hear more. Meanwhile, Nicholas, instead of reprimanding Helen, looked away and silently drank his coffee. Nicholas doesn't treat me poorly, but he never stands up against Helen either. so he's not much help. Before our marriage, he used to try and correct Helen's behavior, but she rarely listens, so he's probably given up by now. After finishing his coffee, Nicholas invited Adam to his office to help him with some computer issues. Leaving the living room, perhaps he was trying to ease the tension by distancing Helen, but it ended up leaving me alone with her in the living room. I had no idea what to talk about with her, and was still thinking of something when she got up and told me to prepare dinner. Actually, this was my first time using the kitchen in the in-laws' house. Helen usually guards it as her domain and never allows me to cook, so I was surprised to be assigned the task this time. I wondered if it meant she was finally accepting me as Adam's wife. "Carrie, you can cook dinner today. I'm sure you're used to ordering takeout all the time and not giving Adam a proper meal, right? This is a chance for me to check your cooking skills." No, that wasn't it. She just wanted to criticize me. Helen, who prides herself on her cooking, observed every step of my preparation, making snide comments. From how I handled the knife to the way I controlled the heat, she pointed out everything, trying to impose her methods. "Careful, your knife skills look dangerous. And watch the heat. Are you planning to burn the house down?" I didn't have the energy to argue, so I just nodded along, completing the meal as quickly as possible. The menu for dinner was barbecue chicken, coleslaw, mac and cheese, and apple pie. Helen looked displeased with the menu, staring at the finished dishes with an unimpressed expression. Even as I was plating the food, she hovered around, continuing to make derogatory remarks about my cooking. "Such a cheap-looking meal. Couldn't you make something fancier for a family dinner? Are you really planning to serve this to Adam? I guess low education means low culinary skills too. I don't think cooking has anything to do with education." Looking back, I realize I should have handled it better, but I felt irritated after she insulted my cooking, so I couldn't help but respond defensively. Helen hadn't expected me to talk back, so after staring in shock for a moment, she became furious. "What? How dare you speak to me like that? If you're going to complain, I'll just have to teach you a lesson. This garbage of a meal is unacceptable. Make it again." She grabbed the plate of food and hurled it against the wall with force. The plate seemed to move in slow motion, shattering against the wall with a loud crash. Food splattered across the wall and floor. I was frozen, shocked by Helen's sudden outburst. But as she threw 2 more plates, I finally snapped out of it and tried to stop her. However, Helen, ignoring me, insisted, "This is a lesson for an insolent Carrie." When she ran out of plates, she started stomping on the food scattered on the floor with her slippered feet. The noise must have reached Nicholas's room because Adam rushed into the kitchen after hearing the commotion. He paused for a moment, stunned by the mess, but quickly understood the situation and restrained Helen as she continued her frenzied stomping. "Mom, what are you doing?" he shouted, finally stopping her. Only after Adam held her back did Helen calm down, suddenly speaking in a serene tone. "Oh, Adam, I was just about to remake the meal, so please wait a little longer." I explained to Adam what had happened, and he was furious with Helen. "Carrie went through the trouble of making this dinner, and you threw it all away before even tasting it. How could you waste food like that? This is beyond cruel." Apologized to her. However, Helen showed no remorse and insisted she had done nothing wrong. I refused to apologize. I did nothing wrong. I was simply guiding Carrie because her cooking needed improvement. As Adam's mother, it's my duty to teach her. She should be grateful. Hearing her justification, I was horrified, wondering if she genuinely believed that. Sure, I wasn't the perfect wife she had in mind for Adam, but that didn't give her the right to throw away someone else's cooking. Adam, looking disgusted, released Helen from his hold and declared, "Mom, I understand your point, but if you keep harassing Carrie without reflecting on your behavior, I won't be able to keep any contact with you. From now on, there will be no more financial support." Helen, realizing the seriousness of Adam's words, quickly exclaimed, "Wait, you can't do that." Yes, Adam and I had been sending a set amount of money to Helen and Nicholas every month. We started it to give them some financial cushion, but it had become something Helen took for granted. She had a tendency to spend extravagantly, particularly on high-end brand items, and had come to rely on the money we sent. Although we knew our funds were being used for her spending habits, Adam felt obligated to repay his parents for their support, so I didn't argue against it. Now, faced with the prospect of losing the support she had come to depend on, Helen pleaded with Adam to reconsider. "But wait, we paid for your expensive college education and raised you well. You owe us this support." "I used to think that too, Mom. But if you're going to treat Carrie like this, then things have to change. Do you know where the money has been coming from lately? It's Carrie who's been supporting you." "What, Carrie? How could that be? She's a housewife, isn't she?" Adam was right, Helen, and Nicholas's financial support had been coming from me. I work as a culinary expert, and I've gained some popularity on social media. The cookbooks I published have become bestsellers, and they bring in a significant income. I don't believe it. Are you two trying to deceive me? We're not lying. I focus on social media rather than TV appearances, so it makes sense you wouldn't know. Would you like to see my account? I showed Helen my social media account. My account featured photos of dishes I had prepared and announcements about my cookbook publications. Seeing this, Helen finally accepted that I was indeed working as a culinary expert. "All right, I see you weren't lying. But why didn't you tell me that Carrie was working as a culinary expert? If I had known, I would have supported her. If I had told you, Mom, you would have used it to brag to everyone. You always did that with me, flaunting that I went to a prestigious university or that I worked at a major corporation. It was embarrassing. I didn't want Carrie to go through that." Adam then revealed another truth to Helen. "By the way, I switched jobs a few years ago. My salary dropped significantly, so the support you've been getting recently has all been from Carrie's earnings. Everything you've been enjoying up to now is thanks to her." Yes, a few years ago, Adam left his job at the well-known company. While the company had a reputable name, the work environment was harsh, and the turnover rate was high. Adam's mental health suffered, and even after quitting, he struggled for a while before finding a new, less stressful job. His new job pays less, but he's much happier now. The reason we hadn't had children yet was that we decided to wait until Adam was emotionally stable. Even after learning the truth, Helen didn't apologize. Instead, she blamed Adam for quitting his high-paying job and not telling her about their decision regarding children. "You left such a famous company. You could have made a lot of money. You should have just endured the stress. And you should have told me earlier about the children. I told you many times, but you never listened, Mom." Adam explained that he had tried to tell Helen his situation multiple times, but she had been too absorbed in her own life to listen. Helen, too caught up in her own idealized image of her son, refused to hear what he was really going through. Frustrated, Adam gradually started to distance himself from her. "I'm tired of trying to live up to your expectations, Mom. Carrie was there for me when I was struggling, and I won't stand by while you mistreat her. Stop making things difficult for us. How could you say that? I raised you with love all these years." Now to be rejected and cut off from financial support. How am I supposed to live? Helen collapsed to her knees, crying. I felt a bit of pity for her, but looking at the mess in the kitchen and recalling all she had done, I knew this was a consequence of her actions. And as she cried about money at a time like this, I couldn't help but find it almost absurd, a small laugh escaping me. Adam, with a cold gaze, looked down at Helen before taking my hand and saying quietly, "Let's go." I nodded, and we left the kitchen, leaving the chaos behind. Nicholas didn't come out of his room even as we were leaving the in-laws' house. Hearing the sound of plates breaking and people arguing would normally prompt someone to check on the situation, but even in such a chaotic state, Nicholas remained isolated in his own space. I don't know if his attitude is part of his personality or if it developed over the years of living with Helen. However, if he had shown even a bit of interest in the household, he might have been able to stop Helen's behavior. On the way home, we sat in the car in silence. Adam, sitting beside me, seemed emotionally drained from what happened at the in-laws' house, staring blankly ahead. For me, it was simply a conflict between a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, but seeing his mother act so irrationally must have been a huge shock for him. I looked at Adam quietly, without saying anything. Noticing my gaze, he turned to me and began to cry. Wanting to let him know that I would always support him, I gently stroked his head. After Adam cut ties with Helen, we were able to enjoy a period of peace. Living without Helen's interference was comfortable, and we spent our days calmly. However, that peace didn't last long. Soon, Helen called, asking for financial assistance. When I answered the phone, Helen's voice was trembling, as if she was on the verge of tears. "Hello, Carrie. Please help me. Nicholas is sick." Helen was calling to ask for financial help. She explained that Nicholas had been diagnosed with an illness during a company health checkup, which meant they could no longer maintain their previous lifestyle. He also needed a special diet, and the treatment costs were high. When I heard the diagnosis from Helen, I suspected that their usual eating habits might have contributed to the illness. Helen often cooked rich, heavily seasoned meals. While her dishes were visually appealing and tasty, they were also high in calories, and I had long thought they might affect their health in the future. Both Nicholas and Helen were overweight, with a tendency to eat quickly and in large portions. Nicholas, in particular, loved fried foods, often piling mayonnaise on them to make them more satisfying. When Adam and I started dating, he was also overweight and enjoyed the same rich, flavorful foods. The first time I cooked for him, he added sauce, saying it was too bland, which led to an argument. I forgave him since he meant no harm, but if it had been done with malice, I wouldn't have been able to overlook it. After learning about the eating habits at the in-laws' house, I worked to improve Adam's diet. Gradually, I got him used to lighter flavors and taught him to eat slowly and chew thoroughly. At first, he felt unsatisfied with the lighter taste, but as he began losing weight and feeling more energetic, he grew to appreciate the change. Now, he is much slimmer, but if he had continued with the in-laws' diet, he might have developed health issues too. While I was thinking about this, Helen continued to tell me about her current misfortunes. And to make matters worse, Nicholas had to quit his job because of his illness, and our income has dropped. "Carrie, could you restart the financial support? But please, don't tell Adam. Though illness can happen to anyone." I felt frustrated that Helen seemed more concerned about her own comfort than Nicholas's health. "I'm sorry, but I can't do that. Adam has already told me not to send any more money." "Oh, come on. I need you to do it secretly. You earn a lot, don't you? You could spare some money, couldn't you? You have those book royalties. Right, why are you asking me? Shouldn't you be asking Adam for support? Adam isn't reliable anymore. Since he changed jobs, his salary isn't what it used to be. The fact that he worked at a major company was a status symbol for me, but now I can't even brag about him to the neighbors. I felt a surge of anger at Helen's words and her attitude. I tried to keep my voice calm so that Helen wouldn't notice, but I'm sure my face showed my discomfort and displeasure. I believed that the root cause of Adam's mental struggles was Helen's excessive expectations. From a young age, he had grown up with her imposing her values on him, always seeking her approval for every decision he made. It wasn't just his career path or education. Even his choice of clothing and friendships were dictated by her. As a result, Adam eventually felt overwhelmed by the pressure to meet her expectations, leading to a breakdown in his mental and physical well-being. To Helen, Adam was nothing more than a convenient figure she could control to her liking. I knew how much Adam had agonized over quitting his job. My mind and body are at their limit. I want to quit, but if I leave this prestigious company, Mom will be disappointed. He said this almost every day. Having seen him struggle so closely, I couldn't forgive Helen's callous remarks. What do you think of Adam, Helen? Just because he no longer works at a big company, are you really willing to discard him that easily after all your doting? I can't trust someone so cold-hearted. When I firmly rejected her request, Helen continued to push back. Don't say that. Adam is no longer reliable, so there's no point counting on him now. I'm expecting you to help me, Carrie. Don't disappoint me. Your words are truly offensive. Please stop belittling Adam. Even at this point, Helen didn't seem to understand that her words were hurting others. Instead, she continued to try and manipulate me. When I responded coldly, she finally realized her mistake and went silent for a moment. Once she stopped speaking, I delivered some shocking news. Actually, I'm pregnant. Helen was stunned, exclaiming in surprise. What? Really? Congratulations. That means I'll be a grandmother. I can finally show off to the neighbors. But we've decided not to let you meet the child. Adam and I discussed this and made the decision together. We don't want you involved with our family anymore. What? What do you mean you won't let me see my grandchild? Explain yourself, Carrie. Helen shouted on the other end of the line, but I ended the call abruptly. Then I blocked her number, and the call stopped. The in-laws' house is more than 5 hours away by car, so it's unlikely that she could come easily, especially with Nicholas being sick. As I mentioned during the call, I am indeed pregnant. After discussing it with Adam, we decided not to let Helen and Nicholas see the child, and this call became a good opportunity to reinforce that decision. From now on, I intend to prioritize Adam and our child, building a warm and stable home for us. Rumors have reached me that Helen is struggling financially due to Nicholas's medical expenses. Even though they have his retirement fund and pension, they can no longer maintain their previous lifestyle. They sold their large house and now live in a small, cheap apartment near the hospital. Helen, trying to cover the treatment and living costs, has taken on multiple jobs, but her health has deteriorated, making it difficult for her to work. Nicholas, meanwhile, blames her, saying, "Your heavy-handed cooking made me sick," and they constantly argue. Some meddling relatives have told me, as family, you should help them out, but I refused. They called me heartless, but we have already cut ties with Helen and Nicholas, and if those relatives are so concerned, they should take care of them instead. I haven't told Adam about the relatives reaching out. For him, outside interference would just disrupt the peace we have now. Of course, Nicholas's illness is concerning, but I believe his current situation is the result of his own actions. He always avoided dealing with problems, never faced Helen directly, and distanced himself from his responsibilities at home. Nicholas focused solely on work, neglecting his family, and avoiding their problems. That attitude only enabled Helen, and ultimately, it led them to their current situation. In the end, Nicholas and Helen were two of a kind. As for our family, we moved to a new home when our child was born. It's in the area where I used to live with my parents, a place with fresh air and plenty of greenery. We didn't share our new address with Helen or Nicholas. We've also blocked their contact information, so it's unlikely we'll ever see them again. Adam's work is going well, and he seems to enjoy his job every day. He finishes work on time and eagerly helps take care of our child when he gets home. Since my work is primarily online, focusing on social media, I can work from anywhere without any inconvenience. Before our child was born, Adam told me he wanted to raise our child freely without imposing his own values. While he still carries some trauma from his own parent-child relationship, he is gentle and kind with our child, so I'm not worried. I believe that having gone through a difficult relationship himself, he is careful to ensure our child doesn't experience the same. Today, we visited my parents' graves as a family. Next weekend, we plan to go on a picnic at the park. I'm going to make Adam's favorite, hearty sandwiches filled with all his favorites. I'm determined to continue building a happy life with my new family, filled with love and joy.
I'm so sorry. There's nothing I can do about it. Right now, sister-in-law is standing before me, offering a heartfelt apology. How did this all happen? Well, the story goes back about a week. My name is Clara. My husband runs a hot dog stand. His name is Osamand. We met at the hot dog stand my husband used to run. He owned a small hot dog stand near the train station, right on my way home from work. I would get hungry after work and often buy a hot dog there. He initiated a conversation, and we started dating. After a few years of dating, we got married. The first time I met sister-in-law, who is now apologizing deeply in front of me, was at a family meeting. Nice to meet you. I'm dating brother. Please treat me well. Nice to meet you. I'm not perfect, but I'm sister, so please be kind. At that time, I thought a nice person had come into our lives. Brother runs a reasonably large company, and sister-in-law is the one who supported him, so he said. He spoke highly of her, calling her a solid and good wife. But a few years after brother got married, sister-in-law's true nature began to show. Every time she came to visit her parents' house, she had more designer items, and her social media was filled with photos of luxury hotel lunches with friends and designer cosmetics. We let it go as long as it didn't affect us, but eventually, sister-in-law began to demand persistent comments. Sister-in-law, why don't you comment on my social media? I only browse. Don't you have any pictures to post? No, I use social media to gather information and look at others' posts. Wouldn't it be nice to comment once in a while? Maybe if I feel like it. Please comment at least once. I'm not doing it just because you tell me to. I was annoyed with her constant requests for comments, so I started ignoring her for a while. Then, she said in a small voice, "You're such a buzzkill. Boring." From that moment on, I decided to avoid sister-in-law more than necessary. I wanted her to understand that I wasn't the type to get overly friendly, but she was thick-skinned and kept asking for comments several times afterward. Ignoring her each time, she finally gave up on the comments. Since we rarely met, I thought I could spend my time comfortably, but whenever I went back to my parents' house, our schedules would coincide, making me feel depressed every time. It happened again during my recent visit home. Sister-in-law, what do you think of this bag? It's cute, isn't it? It's a brand new collection. I'm not interested in that sort of thing. Come on now, every girl loves brand name bags, don't they? I genuinely had no interest in brands or expensive accessories, but it seemed to have struck a nerve with her that I wasn't envious. She said, "You don't have to pretend. If you're jealous, just admit it. I can even give you my old one." I was actually disinterested and annoyed, so I replied, "I really have no interest. Besides, I think those things are best left to those who like them. What's your problem? Stop being so stubborn." She snapped and left without waiting for my brother to return. She snapped and left without waiting for my brother to return. When brother got home, I protested because I thought her behavior was too much. "Hey, can you do something about your wife?" "What happened?" "She made a comment that clearly looked down on me earlier, and it made me really uncomfortable." "What do you mean?" I told him all about her constant nagging for compliments and her condescending remarks, like offering to give me her old things. Recently, she's been treated like a CEO's wife by her housewife friends, and I think it's gotten to her head. I'll have a firm talk with her too, but I'd like you to handle it smoothly. I don't want to fight either, but I don't feel like we can be friends. Just remember to keep our relationship to that of relatives." "I understand. Sorry for the trouble." "I want to say it's not your fault, but she's your wife. Just remember that it affects your reputation." "I understand." After that, we lived peacefully without meeting. There were a few occasions, like weddings or funerals, where we had to meet. Every time, I kept my distance, and she seemed to understand, which made me feel relieved. However, during the greetings for my wedding, I was reminded that people don't really change. When my husband and I were getting married, we had a family introduction dinner with my brother and sister-in-law, my parents, and my husband's parents. Even sister-in-law, I thought, would not say anything inappropriate in such a setting, but she messed up. "By the way, what kind of work do you do?" "I run a humble hot dog stand." "Oh, really? A chain?" "No, it's an independent shop. A hot dog stand. That's not even part-time work." "Hey, come on." "But it's a hot dog stand, right? Even if you were the manager of a chain store, it's still just okay." At that point, brother was pale, and our parents were staring at sister-in-law with disbelief. Are you going home now?" "Yes, I'm heading home." Come on. I wanted to hear more about the hot dogs. I was furious at sister-in-law's mocking tone. "Look, I've been wanting to say this for a while. Can you please stop making fun of people in the way you speak?" "I'm not doing that." "Yes, you are. You're overthinking it." "But it seems I'm intruding, so I'll make my exit now." With that, she clicked her heels and left. "I'm sorry. I apologize. She wasn't always like this." "It's fine. I know my job is easy to make fun of, so I'm okay with it." "I'm truly sorry." After that, there was a brief bout of apologies, but the meal without brother's family ended in a harmonious atmosphere. Even after the meal, I kept apologizing to my husband, but he seemed unfazed by his easygoing personality. When I went to brother's house alone to hand over the wedding invitations, sister-in-law said, "Oh, a hot dog vendor, but you're holding it in such a big venue?" "What does being a hot dog vendor have to do with it? Can you afford a dress change? If you have complaints, don't come." "I don't mind going, but really," she said, her tone mocking throughout. If this attitude continued, I was ready to tell both of them that they didn't have to come to the ceremony. But there were certain circumstances with brother, so I allowed them to attend on the condition that sister-in-law absolutely wouldn't approach me. And then, the wedding day arrived. The wedding was held in a relatively large venue. During the ceremony, sister-in-law was well behaved either due to having some sense of decency or because brother had scolded her. The ceremony ended without a hitch, the reception was mostly over, and we were in the midst of casual conversation when the incident happened. As a crowd gathered around the bride and groom's seats, a drunken sister-in-law approached. She gulped down the champagne in her hand and loudly proclaimed, "A hot dog vendor's wife is heading straight for a low-life existence, isn't she?" The room went dead silent at her words. Sister-in-law, oblivious to the recoiling of those around her, continued to disparage my husband. Then, from a little distance where he was chatting, brother flew over and yelled, "You! What are you saying? But it's true, isn't it? Being a hot dog vendor's wife is pretty low, right? She'll spend her life filthy in front of the kitchen, that's how it feels." "You! Just shut up! Why are you defending her? It's the truth, isn't it?" At that moment, my husband stood up and said, "It's over." "What?" Right then and there, brother turned to those around and offered a heartfelt apology. "My wife is really very sorry. No, I understand your family's way of thinking well enough." "What? What is it? What's going on?" "Listen, the guests at this venue are all people who have invested in brother's company or are business partners." "What? What have you done?" "But why? Why would a hot dog stand owner invite such people? They're not your customers." "Osamand, you see, runs the hot dog stand as a hobby. He's an investor, far wealthier than us, and holds a much higher position. He's been investing in my company and even made contracts because my sister was getting married. You've ruined everything." "No way." Yes, my husband's true identity is that of an investor. He found success at a young age and started a hot dog stand as a hobby while continuing his investments. However, as he mostly entrusts others with the work, he has a large network but lives modestly, without any extravagant lifestyle. I was surprised when I found out he was an investor, but I admired his attitude of being wealthy yet living modestly and only spending money on what's really needed, which led me to marry him. After that, brother took sister-in-law away, and the event ended early, blaming a sudden illness in the bride's family. Of course, any after-parties were canceled. Sister-in-law was summoned to a family meeting. The result was the apology at the beginning. As a result of the family meeting, it was the majority opinion that future dealings should be avoided if sister-in-law is around. Although they acknowledge brother's work, they think that trouble will eventually arise if sister-in-law is present. I agree with that. After all, it did become a big issue. "Please forgive me. I apologize. I want to protect the company, and I can't go on with you." "Divorce. You can ruin someone's wedding and still ask for forgiveness? Impossible. If you're here, I can never enter this house again." "Divorce. I can't either. I can't associate with someone who thinks like that." The family's opinion was consistent. If sister-in-law is involved, it's impossible. If anyone had taken her side, they would have had to think about the future, but fortunately, everyone agreed. The compensation will be offset by the cancellation fees for the after-party and the post-party, as well as the return of the gifts. Your family has been notified. Pack up and leave by this weekend." "What? Why do we have to pay for that?" "Of course you have to. We couldn't hold the after-party or the post-party, and we had to return the gifts because you ruined the wedding. We're all business owners, so the amount of money is significant. If you don't believe it, look at the recorded amount." Indeed, the amount returned was quite large. First, most of the attendees were business owners, and since many of them had invested in the husband's company, many were generous with their gifts. The total amount came to about $50,000. Honestly, I thought if we had this money, we could completely offset the wedding costs, but that's a secret. Sister-in-law was breaking down in tears after seeing the recorded amount, but it was none of my concern. "You should have behaved yourself." "But I didn't know." You shouldn't look down on people just because you didn't know. And you shouldn't judge people by their profession. "But you said you were a hot dog vendor." I didn't say anything wrong. I was going to explain later, but you're the one who made a fuss. You didn't even tell me about the people at the venue. You were planning to be mean from the start. If you were truly involved in brother's work, you'd certainly recognize those faces. No need to tell you. Besides, if you were really friends with me, you'd know who was coming and what positions they hold. Yes, she only supported brother at first. After that, she seemed to focus on having lunches, dinners, practice sessions, and fun with the president's wives. So, she didn't know the faces of brother's business partners, nor did she know about her relationship with her husband. She didn't even seem to know what kind of work brother was doing now. If she had been working with brother, she should have known who the business partners were, and normally, she should have supported him as an entrepreneur's wife. But sister-in-law said, "I'll work hard on my relationships with women, so you work hard at your job. Entertaining the president's wives is part of the job." And she didn't seem to listen. Though he tried to tell her several times, sister-in-law maintained an attitude of, "I'm doing my best on my own." And it seemed like brother had given up. "You're the one who cut off the friendship. I don't like your snide remarks. They belittle me. Besides, you don't normally say things to diminish the groom at someone's wedding. You keep it to a greeting." Wah! Sister-in-law was sobbing like a child, but it had nothing to do with me. "Sorry, but can you take her away quickly? She's noisy." "I apologize, but my daughter's parents are coming here to pick her up today." "What's that? You never intended to forgive her in the first place." "Of course not. Besides, I'm turning a blind eye to your overspending, so be grateful. Or shall I charge you the $80,000 for the overspending? It won't be offset." Inwardly, I thought, so she overspent beyond our means, huh? But I felt a little lighter knowing I didn't have to deal with sister-in-law anymore. After a while, sister-in-law's parents arrived and tried to apologize deeply at the entrance, but I said, "I don't need that, and I don't intend to forgive her. Can you please take her back quickly?" Sister-in-law's parents simply said, "We're sorry," and took sister-in-law away. Later, I received a DM from sister-in-law on social media. "I'll never forgive you for stealing my glamorous life as the CEO's wife. You're rich, so pay me $100,000 as compensation for ruining my life. Or, let me meet brother, and tell him that I've forgiven him, so we should remarry. I'll forgive you for ruining my life if you do that. And send me gifts for the birthdays and anniversaries you've missed. I'll forgive you if you send me some of the latest designer bags." The DM read. I quietly forwarded it to brother. From what I heard, sister-in-law seems to be living alone in a small apartment, having even been kicked out of her family home. Apparently, after the divorce, she'd written something like a contract, stating that if she ever tried to contact me or brother, she would have to pay a used-up fee, and since she broke that agreement, sister-in-law received a bill for $8 million. Sister-in-law tried to get her parents to pay, but sister-in-law's parents were a typical middle-class family. Even though she's their only daughter, it was not an amount they could casually pay. As a result, they told her to pay on her own, and that they knew nothing about it, and she was driven out of her family home, now pursued by brother for repayment. For a while, I kept an eye on sister-in-law's account, but whether she ran out of photos or her friends found out about the divorce, sister-in-law's social media account was gone before I knew it. As for me, I'm working happily with my husband. The work is tough since it's a new job, but chatting with my husband's investment clients and students after school makes it enjoyable. Since my husband isn't fond of luxury, we live a modest life together. The other day, I thought I saw sister-in-law. She looked completely different from her once neat appearance, wearing saggy old sweatpants and cheap slippers, carrying shopping bags. I thought, if only she had listened to what people told her, this wouldn't have happened, but I decided it was a waste of time to feel sorry for her and stopped thinking about it.